guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow and I'm back with another video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on John Lennon and the Beatles. The reason I decided to do this video was after I had done my video on the music industry, I started to energetically kind of poke around and look at other artists and bands in the past, and John Lennon's energy came in quite strong. But I realized that I couldn't just talk about John Lennon without talking about the foundation of where he had come from, because that was so much also a part of what led to him becoming the person that he was later on in life. So that's why we're going to talk about them both in tandem in this video. And we're going to start by talking about the Beatles. So just like I had mentioned in my video on the music industry, for any one person or any group of people, like a band, to become a worldwide sensation, it is because they are owned and operated by somebody or a group of somebody else's. And that was very much the case with the Beatles. You're taking four very, very good looking, clean-cut boys with those cute, shaggy little hairstyles, and you're putting them in suits, and voila, you have the making of a worldwide sensation. And also originally back then, it was very much in line with their image and their public persona of being these clean-cut kids, that the music that was written for them reflected that as well, right? It was really, really cute, like I Want to Hold Your Hand, and just very like innocent and very, very cute. They were young when they first formed the band. And just like all of us, as we get older, we start to become a little bit more opinionated and we start to have ideas about the way we want our life to be. So they started to want to have more of a sense of control in the music that they were writing and in the way they wanted their career to start to take shape. That was a little bit different than the way it had been before. So at that point that they were becoming older and a little bit more headstrong, they were introduced by their managers or their handlers. They were introduced to drugs. And it was done with the sole purpose of bringing them back under control energetically by having them spend less time in their actual physical bodies and opening them up energetically to keep them a little bit more pliable. So if anybody here, for example, I'm not making any assumptions, but if anyone here has smoked marijuana, so you might feel, for example, high in the moment, but it's going to also affect you the day after. Same thing with alcohol. You can have a really bad hangover. So a really good way to keep somebody energetically under control is to introduce them to substances that will compromise their mental capacities and their mental facilities. And if you have them doing it enough time on a long-term enough basis, it really starts to impact their overall mental capacity. So they were introduced to drugs with this express purpose of keeping them energetically under control, right? They had handlers and managers who wanted their career to go a certain way. They were crafting it, they were shaping it. These boys were just like literally paper dolls plopped in to the roles that they were gonna play. And if you think about it, I know that the way that there's a modern day band called One Direction. And I know that the way that One Direction came to be was very much the same way. They were crafted and brought together, right? So weren't all of those boys independently on a music talent show? And then I think it was Simon Cowell. Didn't Simon Cowell say, I don't see you guys being successful independently, but together, I see you being successful. And that was what had very much happened with the Beatles as well. They were brought together for the purpose of creating a lot of money for their managers and for their handlers. They were growing up, they wanted to change, they wanted something different. The handlers, who were still in charge, had their own plans. So they introduced them to drugs with the purpose of keeping them down. Now, interestingly enough, they did not write their own music in the beginning, but at the point that they were doing drugs, they would sometimes like lay around in their drug den or drug stupor or whatever it was, and they would start to play around. Like if they were in a room with like a guitar, one of them would pick up the guitar and start strumming, and then another one would just start singing like weird abstract shit, right? Like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Does anyone actually know what that means? I don't know what it means. Maybe you do. If you know what that means, comment down below. But it was actually the introducing of the drugs that led to them becoming more creative artists in their own right. And the introducing them to drugs was also, as I had mentioned in my video on the music industry, a way of leading to soul corruption. Because you're taking this group of really clean-cut looking boys and you're saying, as if they're doing it, it makes it okay for other people to do it as well. So there is nothing in the world that is sacred. There is no one in the world that is sacred. Nothing can reach or outrun the grasp of a pervasive essence and energy that wants to corrupt society and the souls of people. Very much the case here as well. So now suddenly you have these really clean-cut looking boys who are growing their hair long, and they're singing this weird shit, right? And it became like, it makes whatever drugs they were taking trendy. So it's a way of also introducing this soul corruption into society. But what was so interesting as well was the one thing that was introduced to them as a way of keeping them under control actually led to the breakup of the band. So it was not Yoko Ono, as a lot of people had actually said. She didn't break up the band. It was the drugs. Because the drugs changed the energy of each of the boys independently. And they started to become more introspective and go more into their mind and bring forth these ideas of maybe other things they wanted to sing about or other music that they wanted to make. And it didn't jive with all of the other members of the Beatles, and that was actually what led to the demise of the band. So I just thought it was like really ironic that their handlers introduced them to drugs to keep them under control. That led to the breakup of the band. But at that point, their managers and handlers had made so much money off of them. It was more money than they could spend in several lifetimes. They actually didn't even care at that point. The boys were becoming unruly. They were becoming too headstrong, too independent. And the managers looked at them as if they were more trouble than they were worth. So they just decided, okay, they were going to cut them free and they were going to let them go. So that was what led to the demise of the Beatles. Okay, now is when we're going to get into the energy, specifically of John Lennon. John Lennon had the most beautiful energy and peaceful energy. And I actually wrote that down in big bold letters. He had very peaceful energy. His becoming who he was also very much connected to the drugs, because through his being exposed to drugs and taking drugs, he had actually experienced an ego death. And an ego death is something that's very similar to what happens to someone when they undergo a spiritual awakening, in which it is where the things that you perceive as making you separate from everybody else, so it's literally the ego, the I, the me, It's the way that we identify ourselves, right? So I could, for example, say, I am a woman, I have white skin, I have white hair, and all of those things, right? I have blue eyes, I have skinny little lips, whatever it is. I have multiple ear piercings, right? It's whatever you're choosing to identify yourself with creates the labeling of it creates an individuation between you and other people, because all you are seeing is the labeling and the attachment that creates. When in actuality, when you have an ego death and you realize there is absolutely no separation between me and anybody else. And it doesn't matter what color skin they have, it doesn't matter what color hair they have, none of that matters. What matters is we are all connected through our soul core essence, which comes from God. So when you have an ego death, you come to understand that you are a spiritual being having a physical experience. You have a body. You are not your body. You have a soul. You are your soul. So because of John Lennon's exposure to the drugs, he actually experienced an ego death, which is akin to a spiritual awakening, right? So once he had this spiritual, this ego death and spiritual awakening, he started to access, and again, I've spoken about this in my video on the music industry, his kundalini was starting to rise. It was no longer like a coiled snake living in his stomach. It was coming up. He was connecting it to his crown chakra and connecting straight up to divine, pure source energy. And when that happened, his music really started to change. And that was the things he wanted to kind of like sing about with the Beatles, but they were all like in a different place. So he went his own way and he started singing really, really beautiful music, like his song Imagine. His song Imagine was not like a front. It was not a fake. It was not like pretend. That was really the utopia that he was able to see when he accessed pure divine consciousness. So when he was doing also with like Yoko Ono, I think they had done something like they had stayed in bed to fight like war or to promote peace or something like that. And they had like news reporters that were there with them. That was real fucking shit. It's just that at that time, because so many of the other people that were like energetically and consciously veiled were not understanding it. So it very much could have been perceived like it was some sort of like he had lost his mind, right? And very, very truly, I have to say, for anybody here that has experienced a spiritual awakening and an ego death, it does very much feel like you are losing your mind. And to the outside world, to the people that are still veiled and have not had a spiritual awakening and have not had their own ego death, from the outside looking in, y'all will look crazy. Evolve anyway. Have your spiritual, you can't control it. Once it starts, you really can't control it though. But very much from the outside looking in, the people who don't understand it will say you are crazy. So he was very much perceived to be crazy. He was not. He was singing about this beautiful utopia that he had seen when he was connecting to pure source energy. And he felt like it was his responsibility, once he had seen it, to sing about it, to share about it, to promote it, because he understood he had a platform. He was a public person that people were interested in, and he understood that he really could hopefully inspire and promote a different way of living that he had seen and that he knew was possible. And if you kind of like compare and contrast that to what I had said about in my video in the music industry, this is very much why they will try to lock people down, because if someone is so magnetic, and can really influence people for the good. And now knowing that the music industry is quite demonic, they do not want people doing things like this. Because again, remember what I had said, they're paper dolls. So they cannot speak about the things that they actually want to speak about. They cannot have an opinion about their own actual opinions. They are specifically for the purpose of pushing a particular agenda. And at the point when they start to break free, it's because they are no longer in the club. And back then in the, the 60s, back then in the 60s, it was very different than it is now. That's why when, in today's time, when they lock people in, they lock them the fuck in. So you can't have these high energetic beings going rogue and suddenly becoming spiritually enlightened and wanting to share their vision of a brighter, more beautiful future. It is very much things like this that have led to the music industry changing. They cannot have people going rogue when they're highly magnetic, like John Lennon was. So, and this came through very clearly, and I just like the way it sounds, so I'm going to make sure that I put it in. So what John Lennon did was he felt responsible to say the things that no one else would say, and to pick up a metaphorical paintbrush and to paint a picture of the way the world could be and the way the world that he had seen it to be. So he was very, very passionate about no longer staying silent on the way that he thought that the world could be, and understanding that he was a prominent person who could share and promote that vision of the world. Beautiful, good for him, right? Here's the thing. Unfortunately, the lighter somebody comes, as they are ascending, and as they are raising their vibration, we change our energetic field, and we change our energetic body, and we change our aura. And what happens as we begin to rise energetically and shine brighter energetically, just like moths attracted to a bright white light, when this happens to people, they start to attract a lot of dark entities. Because dark entities don't necessarily like, contrary to what you might believe, they don't actually like the way they feel being a dark entity. Even if they don't understand that they're a dark entity, I'm going to refine this because it can sound a little bit confusing. Because I've spoken about, entities on the astral realm. So let's refine what I was saying. People that are not high vibration beings, human beings, people that are not high vibration human beings. So for whatever reason, they can be very, very low energy, very low density. Maybe they are watching too much pornography, or maybe they're drinking too much alcohol, or they're imbibing too many recreational drugs, or they are not working on themselves and they have a temper, or whatever it is. These are just some ideas of why somebody could be a low vibration human being. Not to mention, if somebody is engaging on all of those things, they can very much be opening their energetic body to dark entities from the astral realm coming in. So that's just going to compound it, right? Like the choices that we make will either help raise our vibration or will keep us in a lower density energetic vibration. It doesn't feel comfortable to them. They just may not understand they can make the change. And in fact, they're responsible for the change. We are all responsible for our own energy. It doesn't feel comfortable to them. So what these low vibration human beings want to do is, if they can find a higher vibration person, they can project their darkness and their issues onto the high vibration being, and then they're saying, it's not me that has these problems, it's you. So if, for example, you have ever been in a very toxic relationship where somebody kept telling you that you were the problem, right? Everything you did was wrong. They were actually sharing insight into their own state, but it's painful to admit that you're the problem. So they're going to make it like you're the problem. And it's easier to blame a high vibration being than it is to examine your own self and work on your own self. Enter the person that shot John Lennon. And it's not like on principle, I'm not going to say his name. I'm just going to say that, like, let's not talk about people that have done really, really bad things as if they're somehow important because they've done it. Because they're not. So we don't even have to talk about him. His entire sole purpose in shooting John Lennon, who was a high vibration light human being, was because he was a low vibration human being, didn't feel good about himself, and he wanted to unload his darkness onto John Lennon. And that's what he did. Now, what was so interesting was, as I was kind of seeing this scene happening, where he was coming and he shot John Lennon. So if you've ever seen like nature video on meerkats, and you know sometimes meerkats they'll stand on their hind legs. They'll stand up like on attention really, really tall with like their front paws in the front like so. And they're like ramrod straight looking at something. That's exactly the way I saw the beings on the astral realm responding to this. Suddenly, their attention was all drawn over to where John Lennon was shot. Collectively and energetically, all of their attention went like this. They were all like ramrod straight, standing up like energetically very, very tall, in anticipation, watching this, and they were like, that is what happened on the astral plane when John Lennon was shot. It got their attention real fucking fast. And they didn't even have to do anything. That's the craziest thing, because like I kind of went into this wanting to explore, like, was it a walk-in that had done this? Was he like mind controlled and that's why he had decided to do this? Like, what was it? No, he was just really a troubled person who didn't like the way his energy felt on him, and he wanted to unload it on somebody else. And at that time, because John Lennon was so high vibrationally and so light in his energetic body, he just attracted a really, really troubled person who didn't want to work on himself. And instead of raising his own vibration, he wanted to extinguish the high vibration of He wanted to extinguish the high vibration of another human being. It's evil. So this was very much a crime of opportunity committed by a sad, wounded soul. Let me see what else I have here. Okay, I did my description of the... Yeah, so the beings on the astral realm were like looking on in fascination. It was a combination of like fascination and like rapt attention and like disbelief at what was going on, because they didn't actually have to have their hand in any of it. But what they, of course, very much enjoyed afterwards was the loosh that was created and released worldwide by people upon hearing about John Lennon's death. These creatures on the astral realm, I tell you, they're very energetically dysfunctional. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. Okay. But again, I just want to finish with, again, John Lennon and his energy. And not to give attention to the dark person who extinguished his light because he was uncomfortable with his own darkness, okay? So John Lennon was inquisitive, very energetically inquisitive. He was curious, he was free-spirited, he was idealistic. And he somehow just like, he got it. Like he could look at things and he could see the way in which people made their lives more complicated than it had to be. And how much people were responsible for their own suffering in life. He just like, he could see beyond like the energetic bullshit, and he could see beyond the veil, but not so much in like the energy way, right? So like what I can do is I can see beyond the veil energetically. He could see beyond the veil interpersonally into other people, psychologically, mentally, emotionally. Like he just got it. So he saw the way that people really overcomplicated things. And his real mission and goal when he was creating his music was to simplify things and to remind people of what was really important in the world and what was really possible in the world. So it was a loss. It was definitely a loss, you know, and his light was put out way too soon because he was really just getting into his energetic groove. And would he have lived a longer life, he could have probably made a lot of really great contributions to humanity. But that was not his destiny. So once again, guys, as always, I hope that you have found this video to be interesting and thought-provoking. If you have, please go ahead, click that like button. And until next time, stay in your high vibration. Even if it triggers people, even if it makes the dark entities uncomfortable, even if you feel like you're going crazy, even if people tell you you're going crazy, stay with it because it's worth it. So until next time, stay there. Bye, guys.